Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, the Compassionate, the Merciful. Dear brothers and sisters, Salamun Alaikum wa Rahmatullah. Tonight, inshallah, if time allows, I'm going to talk about two topics and answer two questions. Number one is why Imam Alhussein's message is everlasting. What's the secret of this epic of Karbala that moves everyone and change everyone, no matter who they are, where they are, or when in the history they live, and will affect them? What is the secret ingredient of Imam Al-Hussein's message? And the second question is, why, despite the strength of this message, sometimes we might not see the effect of this message, a tangible effect of this message in our daily lives. First, we have to talk a little bit about Imam Al-Hussein himself. Imam Al-Hussein should not be just approached as the grandson of the Holy Prophet. He should not just be approached as a Muslim leader, as a revolutionary leader. He is a historical figure who changed the course of history, who made history evolve. What's the meaning of historical evolution? It's different than social evolution. When we talk about social evolution, we mean we can call any revolution that happens in the societies around the world a social evolution. It requires two groups, one that is in power and the opposition who has a certain idea of justice in their mind, whether it is justice in distribution of power, freedom, culture, finances, and politics. And this opposition has to topple and destroy the former construct, the construct that is currently in power, and bring up the change that they want. This is what happens in any revolution around the world and throughout the history. But historical evolution is different than that. In historical revolution, you don't just expect the change to happen right away. You don't necessarily topple the current government. You wait for the change to happen in the course of history. And that's what Imam Al-Hussein's epic did. He changed the history. Maybe in the year 61 after Hijrah, people didn't understand what happened. Maybe 10 years after, 100 years after even, people didn't understand the meaning of Imam Al-Hussein's revolution. But after centuries, now we understand. Here we are, 14 centuries later, we still are commemorating Imam Al-Hussein's martyrdom and his sacrifice. So the message of Imam Al-Hussein, like a coin, has two sides, brothers and sisters. On one side, which is right out there in the front, and whenever we talk about Imam Al-Hussein's revolution, we talk about this side, is the fact that Imam Al-Hussein stood up for justice. He spoke against injustice and oppression. He tried to rid Islam from the misconduct of the power of people in power and from the misunderstandings that were going through the Islamic society at the moment. It's only 50 years after Prophet's demise, and someone like Yazid ibn Muawiyah is on the seat of Khalifa of Muslimin, a degenerate man who openly sins. And Imam Al-Hussein, when he was asked to pay allegiance to this man, he said, someone like me will never join hand with someone like Yazid. He didn't say, I won't join hand with Yazid. He was thinking globally. He was thinking above time. He said, someone like me doesn't join hand with him, because there are going to be always people like me, and always there are going to be people like Yazid. We have the Yazids of our own time right now. and there were Yazid throughout the history. So he's sending us a message that no matter where you are and in which time you are living, you should not join hand with people like Yazid. So he doesn't compromise in his movement against injustice. Never compromises. He leaves Medina, his hometown. He goes to Mecca. When he realizes that he's not safe in Mecca, he leaves for the first city that invited him, Kufa. Thousands of invitations. Imam Alhussein goes towards Kufa, and throughout this journey from Medina to Kufa, which ended in Karbala, Imam is speaking the word of truth. He never entertains the idea of possibility of compromise with Yazid. He always says the word of truth, and he always speaks against Yazid and his government and his goons. So he is observing his ideal of justice to the full extent. And this is one side of the coin. The other side of the coin that we sometimes lose the sight of, and we talk about it less, is the language of compassion that Imam Alhussein is talking with. He's talking to the emotional side of the history. And throughout the journey of Imam Alhussein from Medina to Kufa, we see instances in every turn that Imam Alhussein is showing compassion. Imam Alhussein is avoiding bloodshed in any turn. Imam Alhussein left Medina with his family because there was no safe place in Medina. He couldn't trust anyone with his family. So he takes them with himself and says, the safest hand is my own. I will protect my family till the end. And he did. When he was in Mecca and he heard that there is an attempt to assassinate him, he heard that there are enemies in the robes of Hujjaj that are carrying blades with themselves. He left Mecca because he didn't want to give them an opportunity to desecrate Masjid al-Haram and spill blood on the ground of Masjid al-Haram. He never forces anyone to join them. At every turn he tells them, you can go. Anyone who would come from the companion of Imam Alhussein, anyone who would say, I have family, I have business, I have gardens to take care of, Imam Alhussein would say, go, that's your duty. You shouldn't stay here. Go tend to that, and then if you have time, come back and help us. Some people left. Last night before Ashura, Imam Alhussein turned every light in the tent down and in absolute darkness asked that for the last time, I'm telling you, go. If you don't want to die tomorrow, go. So the people who stayed with Imam Alhussein were actually as compassionate as Imam Alhussein. They understood the meaning of love that Imam Alhussein is propagating. So when the bond between quarrel against injustice and compassion is created by Imam Alhussein, this bond is what makes history, what makes history evolve. At the moment, right after the day of Ashura, the change didn't happen. The change came years after that. And Imam Alhussein was in it for the long run. Imam Alhussein didn't expect that after he is slaughtered in the land of Karbala, a group of enemies would say, oh, what did we do? We did a bad thing. And then they repent. No. Imam Alhussein knew that these people are ashqiya. They are enemies of Allah. They won't change. But his blood would change the heart of other people. And it did. A lot of movements started after the martyrdom of Imam Alhussein. So this is what we're talking about when we say his message is everlasting. This is the key. Combining affection, compassion and love with your quarrel. Imam Alhussein was not just a revolutionary leader who wanted to topple a government and gain power for his own. It wasn't that. And he actually proved that in every turn. People asked him to stay in Mecca. We will support you. Imam Alhussein said, even if I hide in a hole in the ground like an ant, they will drag me out and they will kill me. So might as well be out in the open, let the world watch. What kind of ruthless people are these people? The language of compassion is what is talking to us after 14 centuries. Imam Alhussein could send the best swordman, the best warrior that he had, his brother Abul Fazl Abbas, in the beginning of battle with a legion of the best swordmen, and he could make tremendous damage to the enemy's camp. He could change the course of war. Single-handedly, Abul Fazl Abbas could change the course of war. But this person, Abul Fazl Abbas, has to stand there, hold the flag, till the last man perishes. And he watches his brothers, his nephews, his friends perish one after the other. And he stands there with patience. And then when this warrior comes to the battlefield, is not to fight, is not going there to fight, is going there to bring water for the kids in the camp. The thirst of Imam Alhussein is something that no one can deny. And whenever you tell this story to anyone around the world, no matter their background, no matter their way of thinking, their ideologies, it moves them and makes them think. So that's the secret ingredient, adding compassion to the quarrel against injustice. And that can only happen by the hand of a ma'soom, an infallible imam, because he is above time. He can see the course of history and he can predict what should he do, how should he talk to people, and how should he affect people's hearts. Moving on to the second question, we said that this message is so strong and it moves everyone. Why don't we see the effects of this message, the lessons of this message in our daily lives? We commemorate Imam Alhussein every year in the majalis for 10 days, for 2 months sometime, and we don't see the effect. What's the problem here? What are we doing wrong? Let me explain with an example. When we approach the stories in the Holy Quran, the stories of the Prophet, for example, Prophet Adam, Prophet Noah, Prophet Moses, Jesus, Abraham, Yusuf, what is our approach towards these stories? Are we read them like we are reading storybooks for children? Do we look at them like it's a screenplay, a movie? We read the story of Yusuf and say, oh, poor Yusuf, his brothers abandoned him in a well, but he got them at the end well for him. Are we approaching these stories like a movie, like a children's story, or are we actually digging deep into the meaning of these stories and then dig deep into ourselves, our soul, and try to implement the lessons of these stories into our daily lives? The Holy Quran is not just telling stories, it's teaching humanity. The Holy Quran is saying that there is a Yusuf in every one of you. You will be in Yusuf's shoes one day throughout your life. And you will be in Zulaykha's shoes as well. You will be in his brother's shoes as well. You will be in their place, and you will find yourself filled with hatred and jealousy towards someone. What do? Do you act like the brothers of Yusuf? You will face seduction like Yusuf did. Do you control yourself, or will you succumb to the seduction? You will also be the one who seduces. You can be Zulaykha too. You can be Moses, you can be Pharaoh. These stories reprise in each and every one of us. So what do we do? What is our approach towards these stories? The same mistake, we make the same mistake with the story of Karbala as well. Instead of just crying about the events that happened on the day of Ashura, the tragic events that happened on the day of Ashura, do we try to also understand where did these people come from? What were their backgrounds? Where did Omar Saad come from? Wasn't he a very, apparently a very good Muslim? He used to do Hajj, he used to pray. He was very close to the family of the Prophet. He knew Imam Alhussein very well. But he actually led the army against him and killed him. What happened to a man like that? Can it happen to any of us? Of course, when Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad told Umar Saad, ordered him to go and march his army against Imam Alhussein, he said no. And he actually asked Ibn Ziyad to refrain from doing this as well. He said, you will doom yourself to hell if you stand against Imam Alhussein. But then Ibn Ziyad started to intimidate him, and at the same time started to bribe him, like gave him money, gave him the promise of ruling over the city of Ray. And he caved. The money that was offered to the people of Kufa to abandon Imam al-Hussein was a substantial amount of money. Who says we will not cave? So do we understand where Umar ibn Saad went wrong? The other side would be Hur. He was the commander of the army who surrounded Imam al-Hussein and kept him in Karbala when he arrived there. And when Imam al-Hussein scolded him very harshly, Hur surprisingly holds himself and stays silent. He could have drawn his sword right then and right there, but he didn't. At least he could have said something back to Imam al-Hussein. He could have become angry or said something, but he didn't. He stayed silent. What do we learn from this? Every year, in the first 2 nights of Muharram, reciters will tell the story of Hur, and they will mention this part where he stayed silent. Every year we hear this, and still we talk back to our parents. So it means we didn't learn anything from the story of Hur. Hur is the person who doesn't burn all the bridges behind himself. His silence at the moment was the key that made him come back to Imam al-Hussein on the day of Ashura and be saved. So do we actually try to learn lessons from this people? And do we try to examine what happened to them that they did what they did at that moment in the events of Ashura? What made Harmala kill a 6-month-old infant? What made him do that? What made Umar Saad and Shem come and stand in front of Imam al-Hussein? And what made Hur and other companions of Imam al-Hussein to stay with Imam al-Hussein? So next time, brothers and sisters, next time that a reciter is telling you about the background of Imam al-Hussein's companion and his enemies, let's try to dig deeper into the lesson that we can receive from these people. And then dig deep into ourselves, into our soul, and try to implement these lessons into our daily lives. Inshallah, we will all be people who stand for what is right and speak the word of truth into the face of the tyrants throughout our lives. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.